talk more about this in a moment. We've got to go back to the GCC summit, the Gulf Cooperation Council, where President Erdogan of Turkey is preparing to speak. Let's listen in.
GCC summit. This is a reflection of the close relations between the GCC member states and the Republic of Turkey, adding further dimensions and taking these relations to higher levels, political, security, and cultural, to the best interests of our respective people, hoping that the summit will achieve its desired goals. Thank you. It is with pleasure I give the floor to my brother, His Excellency President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, Mr. Secretary General, I salute you with respect and appreciation. May God's peace and blessings be with you. It is with pleasure that I take part in the 44th GCC summit and to be among you here today. I extend all thanks and appreciation to my brother, Sheikh Tamim, the Emir of Qatar, as a guest of honor. Our relations with the GCC member states is taking new levels day after day, and my presence here today epitomizes our mutual will. And I am certain that we can cement these relations by joining hands and hearts as well. The volume of trade between Turkey and the GCC countries has increased 13-fold, coming to $23 billion. It is very important to also have the free trade agreement between Turkey and the GCC member states come into effect. It is also with pleasure to see Turkey a tourist destination to all the GCC citizens. 5 ministerial meetings on the strategic dialogue were convened, and we hope that the 6th one will be convened on the first quarter of 2024 in Turkey as a host country. We pay great attention to the projects and enterprises on transportation roads and networks which connect the GCC member states to Europe, and we can continue to develop our relations in the energy domain. Turkey has become a safe haven for international and GCC investments, and we have witnessed very significant development in terms of security and confidence in investment. Also, the Turkish military industries stresses the significance of this cooperation. That's why it is imperative to continue to diversify our aspects and domains of cooperation. My brothers and friends, during the extraordinary summit convened in Riyadh between the Organization of Islamic Conference and the League of Arab States, we all touched the significance of cooperation and solidarity. Our talks on Gaza was very significant towards a joint action, and it is very important to continue to monitor and follow up with the decisions and resolutions handed down during that summit. Similarly and equally enough, the Ministerial Council's efforts are also important. We also commend the mediation efforts played by the state of Qatar for the truce and swap of detainees and captives. We had hoped that the ceasefire would have been permanent, as Netanyahu is gambling with the entire region's future for his own political calculations. The killing of women and children, as 17,000 unarmed innocent civilians were killed. This constitutes a war crime, and Israel must be penalized and held to account for these crimes. Turkey extended the necessary relief aid to Gaza through 12 cargo planes. We also procured a number of Gazans patients and wounded, including cancer patients. Our goal is to have a permanent ceasefire established and an independent Palestinian sovereign state be established on the 1967 border with East Jerusalem as its capital. And within this context and towards this end, we are prepared, as explained to all the states, including the regional states, that this should be included among the options, as we are prepared to act as a guarantor state. This injustice cannot continue. In relation to Syria and to restore security there, which the PKK and PYG terrorist activities cannot be resumed at this region. It is that these activities that undermine our efforts towards peace and security. We aim towards finding a diplomatic solution in Syria on the basis of the UN Resolution 2254. We must provide a solid ground in these terms. We also work towards the voluntarily return of Syrian refugees. We, together with other stakeholders, we pay also close attention to the proceedings of the GCC summit in terms of reinforcing the institutional foundations, as the strategic partnership with the GCC member states will provide new horizons to the member states. We also aim towards reinforcing and expanding our relations in terms of the strategic cooperation. By this, I conclude wishing you all the success. I thank my brother, His Excellency President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, for his message. In the conclusion of the proceeding of this summit, I reiterate my appreciation to you for taking part, and I express my pleasure for the brotherly state, atmosphere and understanding in the discussion and the wisdom in drafting the resolution handed down, which I hope will contribute to the prosperity and welfare of our respective states and peoples, serving to the causes of our Arab and Muslim nation. I also extend all thanks and appreciation to the members of the delegations and the Secretary General and all the staff of the Secretary General for their concerted effort during this edition. And to conclude, I reiterate our welcoming to you all among your brothers in your second homeland, hoping to meet with you in the upcoming summit, praying to God Almighty to save you and guide us toward the best interest and the welfare of our peoples. Thank you. Proceedings concluded.
Well, you were listening to concluding comments there by the Emir of Qatar after speeches given by leaders attending the Gulf Cooperation Council summit here in Doha. A moment before, we heard from Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan with his thoughts on events in Gaza. Of course, high on the agenda there, Netanyahu gambling, he said, with the future of the entire region for his own political calculations, calling for Israel to be penalised for war crimes, for an immediate ceasefire and for a return to talks towards a permanent Palestinian state. Our diplomatic editor, James Bays, was listening in. He's there, indeed, at the summit. He joins us live. James, what does Turkey bring to proceedings?
Well, I think it is important that you had the President of Turkey talking and the Emir of Qatar talking because they were very strong in their condemnation of Israel's bombardment of Gaza. It's interesting that some of the other members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, although their position as members of the Arab League and the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation is that they want a permanent ceasefire and they condemn Israel's actions. Some of them, I think, probably would have been a little bit more muted in their criticism of Israel in a public setting, and that's because you've got to look at the different nations that make up the Gulf Cooperation Council. Some of them have very different backdrops to their relations with Israel. You had, during the Trump administration, the Abraham Accords that were signed, and that includes the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. They have normalization deals with Israel, and despite what has happened in the last couple of months, and despite what we're seeing even now in Gaza, they have not dropped their diplomatic relations with Israel. They've just condemned its actions. And remember, Saudi Arabia was also very close to signing one of those normalization deals. Prime Minister Netanyahu telling the UN General Assembly in New York in September they were on the cusp of a historic deal. Of course, that deal never got signed, and it's certainly on hold right now. But I think for some of the GCC countries, this is a little bit more complicated than it is for Qatar and for Turkey, which is here obviously not a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, not a country in the Gulf, but an important regional player invited as the VIP guest for this annual summit of the GCC. The way it works in this organisation is you have your annual summit at the beginning, and then you have a year as the chair. So Qatar is the chair of the GCC for the next year, and then there'll be a summit in Kuwait when Kuwait takes over the chairmanship next year.
OK, James, thanks for that. James Bays, our diplomatic editor at the GCC summit. And let's cut back now to Sami Hermez, who is still here with me on set. He's an associate professor at Northwestern University in Qatar. And Sami, I just want to pick up on what James was saying there. Qatar and Turkey are speaking strongly in condemnation of Israel's actions. All of these countries are united in wanting to see a permanent ceasefire, but some of them perhaps more muted in their public criticisms because of their individual ongoing relations with Israel. So this is a body that speaks with one voice, but not necessarily with great force.
Yes, indeed. And I think at this point, we'd have to sort of wait and see what the final declaration that comes out of this summit is. They're able, you know, in fact, I thought Turkey's president was, could have been stronger.
He's used much more eviscerating language in the past.
In the past, exactly. Yeah. And so I was a bit sort of unimpressed or surprised. Yeah. But these are, you know, the public pronouncements. Let's see what comes out with the declaration. But, you know, I think we were talking earlier, if you don't mind, sort of going back to the public
I'm happy
pressure.
to. I was going to as well.
I think what needs to happen alongside these diplomatic maneuvers is global public pressure. What you saw during the pause, naturally people are sort of in a wait and see, and then the bombings escalates, but people need time to sort of take back to the streets and react. But you're seeing that again in Western capitals. There's actions being taken, protests. And I think, what I was saying earlier is that the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions, is an important part of this, this global pressure, because it's through that people get educated. It's through that we call for a military embargo, for example. And we've seen unions in Italy and Greece, I think in Belgium, refuse to sort of unload or unload or sort of to supply ships with arms. So we've seen some of that taking place, and we need to see more of that. And it needs to get obviously up to the level of sort of political action. But I think that the sort of, these boycotts also from the Arab world, right? We haven't seen Arab governments take these sort of positions. And so you need more public pressure. It's there, but it's not this kind of critical mass. And, one last thing I'd like to say is sort of in Western capitals, what you've seen are Jewish allies, right, who have stormed the Capitol and occupied spaces, the senators' offices and so on, who have really kind of put this sort of anti-Zionist agenda on the table and have been allies of Palestinians. And I think that is really important in shifting public discourse, shifting political discourse in the US especially.
Sami, thanks for your thoughts. Great to hear them.